What's going on, folks? Today I'm going to do hopefully a short video about the topic, was Jesus a social justice warrior? We're going to be citing the Bible. Now, the reason I wanted to talk about this was because I saw a post on Facebook from one of my Facebook friends. He's actually used to be a teacher of mine in high school. And he posted this. I'm just going to read the post for you. Just reading about Jesus' many miracles and commandments he provides in the New Testament and thinking just how much of a socialist he was. And then further down, someone said, social justice, so not socialism, actually quite different, is at the heart of his message. He definitely demonstrated the right way to live. Now, that last sentence, he demonstrated the right way to live, I do agree with that, although I would point out that Jesus was inhabited by the Spirit of God, and he was created perfectly, unlike the rest of us who are created in God's image but not perfect. Um, so there is a bit of a conflict in that a lot of Christians want to be exactly like Jesus, but that necessitates being perfect. It necessitates having perfect judgment. And I mean, Jesus identified himself as being the fulfillment of the prophecy in Isaiah 53. You can't just copy Jesus's behaviors. I certainly hope you don't, because I guess you would think that you are the next coming of Jesus or something. But yes, obviously, what he preached to us is what we should practice. But this social justice is at the heart of his message. His miracles and commandments make him a socialist. I want to focus on social justice in this video, but we can talk about socialism in a different video. Would Jesus have endorsed social justice? My understanding of social justice, I hope this is correct, is the idea that in regards to political and economic issues, and to some degree social interactions, um, there are inequities or inequalities or both. I mean, it's kind of hard when you have like 13% of the population is black. It's about 60% are non-Hispanic white people in the U.S. I don't know what equal would look like, because obviously white people are collectively going to have more resources than black people, but it could be equitable, right? Like 13% of assets are distributed among black people, 60% among non-Hispanic white people, something like that, right? Anyways, suffice to say, I don't think I've ever heard of a social justice movement or uh, something that social justice warriors are advocating for that doesn't have something to do with material outcomes on planet Earth. And this idea that social justice is at the heart of his message in regards to what's happening on planet Earth, this doesn't really make any sense. We certainly are all created in the image of God, and we are all equal in his eyes. So equality in a moral sense, in a spiritual sense, and equality in the possibility of you or I going to heaven because of being a good Christian, yeah, there's certainly equality in that regard. But the idea that the distribution of material resources um, should be a concern, was a concern of Jesus, that he in any way prioritized the distribution of anything material, and that there should be an equitable or an equal distribution of material things. Um, that doesn't really make sense. So we're going to look at two Bible verses really quick. So at the beginning of Matthew 5, this is the beginning of the Sermon on the Mount. Jesus says, or says in Matthew 5, 2-5. He says, Matthew 5, 2, and he opened his mouth and taught them, saying, Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are they that mourn, for they shall be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Now, I selectively quoted that just because obviously the Sermon on the Mount is very long, and not all of it's relevant to materialism. Blessed are the poor in spirit. Just for the record, that does not mean people whose spirits are poor, who have no or are lacking in spirit. That means that in a spiritual sense, poor people are blessed. Their spirits are blessed. And then blessed are the meek. A meek person, that could mean a lot of things. It could mean someone who's afraid to speak their mind, someone who's afraid to, in a personal interaction or in terms of like political speech. It could be someone who's afraid to take risks, someone who's afraid of leadership, telling other people what to do. It could mean a lot of things, but suffice to say, a meek person is someone who, by nature or by their material circumstances, does not have power and the ability to strongly influence their life and their surroundings and the people around them. The idea that after saying this, Jesus would be highly concerned with making poor people wealthier or eliminating in a structural sense, like working on long-term outcomes. The idea that Jesus was highly concerned with people's long-term outcomes on planet Earth, that people who are poor today, we want to make sure that relative to other people in their country, like obviously my country, the US, that we want to make sure that they have more money, that they have better access to healthcare, that they have better access to affordable housing, these kinds of things. We'll get to the money thing in a second, but it doesn't really seem to be the case. I mean, he's literally saying that if you are poor, you are spiritually blessed, and the kingdom of heaven belongs to you. And if you are meek, you are essentially a powerless person. And in some sense, you shall inherit the earth. And that particular phrase, for they shall inherit the earth, there's a lot of interpretations of that. I don't think it's highly relevant to discuss all of the things that could mean, but inheriting the earth, that seems kind of nice, right? That doesn't sound like a bad thing, to have power or control over, to inherit all the things of the earth. Not too bad of a reward. He's saying the poor and the powerless have great rewards ahead of them. Why would you want to be more enriched? Why would you want to be more powerful? If this is, if you take Jesus' word as a commandment and a statement of fact, which I do, I don't aspire to be a wealthy person. That doesn't mean I aspire to be a beggar because I am an animal, and I don't mean that in a bad way. Just I am a materialistic person. I am concerned with what happens to me on planet Earth. I don't want to be so poor I can't afford healthy food and healthcare and dental care. I don't want to be so poor that on a cold night like right now in Taiwan, it's pretty cold. I don't want to be sleeping outside. Yeah, there's some limits on how poor I'm willing to be, but certainly it seems clear to me that being poor leads to some pretty good long-term outcomes. Being a person who does not exert their will on the people and the society around them is a virtue, and you shall inherit the earth itself. So and when I say materialistic, I'm not accusing people of being greedy. I'm using that in the Christian sense, that to be materialistic in a Christian sense means you're concerned with what's happening on earth right now or within your lifetime. You're not concerned with what happens in heaven. You're not, at least when you talk about materialistic topics, you're not talking about how you're going to make sure that you go to heaven and other people as with whom you should be concerned with their spiritual life. You're not concerned with whether they're going to heaven. Helping someone get access to healthcare, correct me if I'm wrong, and I mean that, but I don't really see how improving someone's access to healthcare is improving their access to heaven. Those seem like completely irrelevant topics. But I said I'd talk about money, so let's go look at the most famous biblical, or I should say, most famous New Testament verse on money. So this is about the famous phrase, render unto Caesar that which is Caesar's, render unto God that which is God's. I'm going to read the whole passage just so you know the context. Then went the Pharisees and took counsel how they might entangle him in his talk. That's kind of like basically making him contradict himself or say something that he will come to a regret, something incriminating. And they sent out unto him their disciples with the Herodians, saying, Master, we know that thou art true, and teachest the way of God in truth, neither carest thou for any man, for thou regardest not the person of men. Nasty words from the Pharisees. Anyways, I'll continue. Tell us, therefore, what thinkest thou? Is it lawful to give tribute unto Caesar or not? And just what that could mean literally giving tribute, like I'm respecting you or something, or it could mean paying your taxes. Either one is an acceptable interpretation. So 18. But Jesus perceived their wickedness and said, Why tempt me, ye hypocrites? Show me the tribute money. And they brought unto him a penny. And he saith unto them, Whose is this image and superscription? Superscription, that just means what's written on the coin. They say unto him, Caesar's. And he saith unto them, Render therefore unto Caesar the things which are Caesar's, and unto God the things that are God's. And when they had heard these words, they marveled, and left him, and went their way. Just in case people don't know what render means, in this context it means to give. Render generally means to give either intentionally or not, as possible for a thing to render something to you without the intention of doing so. But it means to give or to provide something. After reading this, I'm not really sure how you could come away with the idea that giving money to people is inherently godly. I mean, I suppose it could be, but what is going on here is that the money is Caesar's and it belongs to Caesar's. And as he's answering their question in a very clever way, he's saying, yes, you can. It is acceptable to give Caesar's money to Caesar, or essentially the government's money to itself. It is an earthly thing, and more or less performing earthly deeds that are not immoral, that are not badly intentioned. There's nothing wrong with that, more or less. This quote is often invoked to establish separation of church and state. That's a very strong interpretation of this phrase, but certainly Jesus is establishing that money, and whether it's giving money to the government or someone else, it is not of God. And the distribution of money, whether I keep it for myself or I give it to the government, for whatever purpose they're going to use it for. It could be for a social justice program, could be for the military, I mean, it could be for anything. That is not a godly act. He's quite clearly saying that this money, let me get a coin. This isn't Caesar, this is this is Sun Yat-sen, because it's Taiwanese money, but this is Caesar on here, and this belongs to him. It's not God's. And of course, he quite clearly implies that whether in a physical or spiritual sense, there are things that are God's, and you should give those to God. But money is not one of those things. So I might add more Bible verses in here. I don't know how long I'll make this video, but I hope that makes it clear that for a Christian, being wealthy, even avoiding poverty, is not really a Christian goal. Because as a Christian, your goal is to go to heaven. That's my goal. And if you're a Christian or you're thinking about being a Christian, that is an important goal for you. Not going to hell. I suggest not going to hell. That's the priority. It's your eternal life, not your earthly life. And the idea that changing material outcomes, such that this group, that their material outcomes are down here, let's move it up to here to be more equitable, that is a Caesarean way of thinking. That's an earthly way of thinking. Whether you have good intentions or not, and that depends on the person, it doesn't really matter any which way you think about it, especially when you're thinking about the structure and what government's doing. Now you're not even thinking about what you're doing. Your personal actions and behaviors should be your greatest concern, not the structures that create outcomes for people. That's not an evil thing to think about. It's just not Christian. That is an earthly way of thinking. You're thinking about how can we alter outcomes here on planet Earth. That's not what Christianity is about. So I think that satisfies the question of is being a social justice warrior, is that a godly way of thinking? Is that what Jesus preached? No, he definitely did not preach social justice. The equality or equity in distribution of material resources, and the equality and equity of the distribution of outcomes, whether good or bad. How often people are victims of police violence? Police violence is bad. Would Jesus have been concerned about making sure that black people are 13% of the population, so 13% of victims of police violence are black? If somebody wants to find a Bible verse where Jesus talked about that, totally cool. I'd love to see it. I am 99.99999% sure that not only did he not address that particular topic, while he definitely would have been concerned about police violence, which in general is evil, I don't really see any reason to believe that he would have been particularly interested in making sure the distribution was equitable or something. And I'm not saying that that's like, I don't mean to put words in SJW's mouths, but ultimately the equitable distribution of events and material goods and services and such, that is the concern of the social justice warrior. They don't talk generally about spiritual outcomes, whether you go to heaven or not. That's not really the domain of social justice warriors. That's not what they talk about. So it's very challenging to reconcile the idea that what social justice warriors talk about, which is at the end of the day, material outcomes on planet Earth, is was the essence or even a tangential message of Jesus's. It wasn't. He didn't talk about earthly structures like the government or non-governmental organizations and how they serve the earthly needs of anybody, whether it's poor people, wealthy people, whatever. That was never a part of Jesus's ministry. He's always been about morality and about not only following the rules of the Old Testament, which he did want us to follow. I did not come to destroy the law, but to fulfill it. But to understand the meaning, like, what do they mean? Why do these rules exist? Because he did not endorse a literal interpretation of the Old Testament. This is the core of his ministry. It was never about, and again, I'm not using this in a judgmental or negative way, in a Christian way. He was not concerned with material things and material outcomes on planet Earth. That was never the goal. I'll go back to that verse I supplied one more time. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. That is unambiguously saying that you will be a spiritually blessed person if you are poor. And that's hard for everybody to accept, including Christians, because nobody wants to be poor. Anybody who's met a homeless person or done a little bit of reading about the conditions of being homeless, or, not homeless, but you're poor, everybody knows poor people, and it sucks to be poor. Nobody wants to hear that, but that's what it says right there. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. If you're a social justice warrior and you're advocating, as many of them do, for increasing the political power of this or that group, that would be a reduction in the meekness of that group. That's not Christian. That's not what Jesus preached at all. So I'll just end my recording right there. I might add more later. Bonus section time. I am sorry to inform you that this is not going to be a very exciting bonus section. This guy's cozy. It's late at night, but before I go to bed at 1:30 a.m., I just remembered I forgot a very important Bible verse, so let's take a look. Lay not up for yourselves treasures upon earth, where moth and rust doth corrupt, and where thieves break through and steal. But lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust doth corrupt, and where thieves do not break through nor steal. For where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. This is such a fantastic quote, especially that part at the end. For where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. That is just timeless wisdom. I think you don't really have to be a Christian to recognize the truth of that verse. I could talk for so long about this, but I think that kind of speaks for itself. If you want treasures in heaven, you have to put them there, and focusing on treasures on earth of any kind, including frankly of the human sort. Humans' bodies and ultimately our existence fades away over time and eventually completely ceases to exist, at least on planet Earth, unless I guess God chooses you to take on the form of an angel and come back down to deliver messages. Basically your husband, your wife, eventually they will be gone, even if you still live past their death. So, I wisdom for the ages, really. I hope you got something out of it. Anyways, thank you for listening. Have a good one.